Let's start while the last people are arriving after the coffee. We will start the first session, the plenary, opening plenary. Can we start the recording? So, good morning, everyone. I am Luca Belli. I'm professor here at FGV Law School. I coordinate the Center for Technology and Society, and I'm going to moderate this opening plenary with my colleague, Professor Nicolas Zingales. He's also a professor at FGV Law School. So, Professor Zingales, you can come up to the stage. A round of applause to him. He's not only a professor, but my great friend and co-founder of CPDP LatAm. I'm going to invite now our distinguished guests for this opening plenary. First, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Privacy, Anna Brian. Welcome, Anna. Next, the President Director of the National Data Protection Authority, Valdemar Gonçalves. Welcome. Luana Roncarati from the Brazilian Ministry of Management and Innovation. She's the Deputy Secretary of the Ministry of Management and Innovation. Welcome, Luana. Then we are going to invite Armando Manzueta, who is the Director of Digital Transformation of the Dominican Republic. Welcome. He's also a member of the UN panel for public digital structure initiatives. And then we have Ahmad Binder, Mr. Ahmad Binder, Policy Innovation Director of the Digital Cooperation Organization. Welcome. And then we have Andrea Sads, Legal Director and Data Protection Officer from Global. Welcome, Andrea. And last but not least, Samantha Oliveira, Data Protection Officer of Mercado Livre. Before we pass the floor to our speakers to start the CPDP LatAm 2024, I would like to share a few thoughts for you to understand what was the rationale behind the organization of this event. This year's edition is dedicated to data governance from Latin America to G20 because the double objective of the next few days is to understand how the challenges debated globally are impacting Latin America and how the ideas and the proposals from Latin America can also impact the global debates. So we will have 2 days of multi-sectorial debates. We will have a side event on Friday about digital sovereignty in the G20, and you are all invited. And I want to dedicate a few minutes to explain this connection between data governance and digital sovereignty, that this is something that we debate a lot in the Center of Technology and Society in the last few years. We propose an idea and a vision of digital sovereignty as the capacity to understand the functioning of digital technology, to develop it and regulate it as its own values. So there's nothing authoritarian or protectionism. This is based on the empowerment of the individuals and the nations. Data governance really performs an instrumental role to guarantee the individual and the national sovereignty on data, because clearly it is based on the self-determination. This is the word that is in the second article of LGPD that was created by the Germans in 1983. that migrated to Latin America. This is a good example of international influence, a positive international influence. The informative self-determination is if you want to know who collects your data, with what purpose, who is going to be shared with. And in the last few years, in the last 2 years, with technological evolutions, we managed to see a trend that is worrying, that technologies that were developed with data scratching, that are questionable, opaque treatment, and limited accountability. And it's really difficult to conciliate this trend with informative self-determination. That's why the data regulators have a critical role. We already mentioned that last year. The regulators are the most critical ones because they are the ones who are going to allow the sustainable development of technology, the economy, and the society and democracy. That's why they are being called upon, and they will continue to be called upon. And this is a huge responsibility. We are not the only ones who have a huge responsibility. The G20 debates will bring to the surface the necessity to see the data governance in a development perspective. For 15 years in other conferences, we talked about data as the greatest, the most valuable assets that we have. So we have to start coming up with this data strategies and governance framework to explain to us how to use the value of this data in a located and diffused way and not concentrated in only a few companies. And this is a debate that creates a connection between these 2 points, the informative self-determination and the sustainable use of data between Latin American and G20. So we need to use this dynamic of data, that we need to have the as individuals the data holder in the best conditions possible. My opinion is that no, but we have 2 or 3 days to prove me wrong. Why, in my opinion, we don't have the best conditions? Because we are negotiating with asymmetry of power in a very fragmented and non-organized way. It's totally organized, in fact. So when you arrived here in this room, we distributed this position paper that we released today with my authorship and Pablo Palassi and Ana Brian and Jonathan Mendonça about a proposal of an Inter-American Convention of Data Treatment and the Informative Self-Determination. Because while having a regional approach, we are going to recover the bargaining power and we're going to redefine the conditions based on the fundamental rights and also favoring a unique market of provision of services in the Latin American level based on common rules and common principles and common obligations. But in the best practice that we identified in Latin America and in international best practices, we also have a slide with the QR codes in case you are interested, and download the PDF and make comments because this is an ongoing work. I just want to end my brief speech to making a tribute to Danilo Doneda. It's not a coincidence that the work starts today in July 17th in CPDP LatAm, because July 17th we celebrate Danilo Doneda's birthday. He passed away 2 years ago, and CPDP LatAm wouldn't exist without him. So one of the best tributes that we can pay to him is not only offering this work to his memory, but to honoring him in his birthday, because without him we wouldn't be here. The ideas that were put in this work would never be mature, and the connections that we created in the last 5 years wouldn't have happened. So now I'll pass the floor to my colleague Nicolo. Thank you, Luca. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and being able to share this experience and this tribute to our dear friend Danilo. I echo Luca's words. in terms of emphasizing the importance of having this multi-sectoral discussion about the strategic data governance in an era that we are facing challenges of generation and harvesting and massive use of data for artificial intelligence. We have to think closely about a strategy for artificial intelligence. What we have nowadays is a strategy that was created in the beginning of the discussion by the Brazilian government when we were starting this discussion, and it is really incipient. The Bill of Law 2038 provides more inputs for this strategic view for the development of AI. Because it's not the role of the Bill of Law, it's not the role of a law that regulates artificial intelligence to bring a vision about investments, education, but something that it's already done somehow by the Bill of Law about the fostering and creating an obligation to the public entities to generate some digital education towards our use of artificial intelligence. So this is really important, but the data governance has an essential role to generate a model that can allow an adherence to the local reality, understanding the characteristics of the ecosystems, and these can also be used to create regional alliances. We saw last week a speech from President Lula about Mercosur and the importance to create a governance agreement of data that can be strategic. Mercosur can be a type of an alliance. Latin America is also an interesting forum. The European Convention and the Inter-American Convention of Human Rights can also provide a base to go for a construction. But I just want to make two suggestions because it seems to me that they are very important points for this strategy for artificial intelligence. At first, a concept of common data space. This is something that is being created in other regulatory models, but we cannot simply import them. We have to think about the local reality. And nowadays, as data space is not only an infrastructure, it is a concept that includes governance mechanisms that allow to assure that the rights and the freedom can be preserved.
So it's not just about data protection as a final objective. In this common space, these AI systems can be trained in a way that they are preserving the freedoms of individuals. And we need interinstitutional cooperation here. It's not just about infrastructure, it's about cooperation between different kinds of regulators. And this would then allow us to guarantee that all these rights are respected. The second point is that we also need to advance and in this, and I think it could be a regional alliance, thinking about a regulatory framework for data intermediaries. So there are different kinds of agents here. But firstly, we could think about intermediaries that can help us in exercising the rights of those responsible for data protection. So we will be seeing a study that will be presented at a session today at 2:30 p.m. So considering these acquisitions of the proprietors, the responses are very different and they show different levels of preparation on behalf of the companies, specifically companies up until a size. And so we're thinking about services here, considering those who purchase this, and this could be an interesting idea for us to advance in terms of data protection. And then when we think about the owners of the data and the information that is sent out, sometimes it is not enough for us to understand the totality of the treatment of this data. So when we put together information from different data owners, then we can learn more about processes for data treatment. This is a kind of intermediary, an example. Then we also have data cooperatives that not only access the data and help individuals to make these acquisitions, but they also help them to destine this data for collective benefits. So just to conclude here, what we need is something that allows us to have more control over the data, but not just under an individual perspective. This is an important point because individual empowerment sometimes can go against the freedoms and rights of other individuals in society. So we need to think about how we can promote. You will hear about my data, for example, which is in our schedule here. It will be presented in several very interesting sessions, and the idea is to create this collective control. We will have a session at 2:30 p.m. about data from drivers of different apps, ride apps, that can help us understand the algorithmic pricing and also the viability of traffic and transit in cities. Today in our National Congress, there is a project about the monetization of data, considering the Brazilian ecosystem. And this is a very interesting project because it can give individuals a greater bargaining power in terms of how they relate to these companies that offer digital services, considering negative consequences as well. So we need to think about how this could increase the inequalities in society. So who is allowed to sell this data? Who depends on this data? And how this data might be then transferred to third parties. The idea here is to generate a governance mechanism that allows for greater individual and collective control over the data, and also for this to be more connected to our social reality. So an AI ecosystem that is more specific, customized, and not simply copying models from abroad. And I hope we're thinking about individuals as well as society as a whole. And so I think now we can start with our very interesting discussions about AI governance regarding data, not only in Brazil. We want to include, of course, in this conversation, the G20, Latin America. We have several speakers here that are quite excellent and that I think will contribute to the diversity of this discussion. We will start with our first speaker, the Special Rapporteur for Privacy for the UN, Professor Anna Brian. Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege to be here with you all at the 4th edition of CPDP LatAm 2024. As you all know, data governance has become very significant over the past few years. In our digitalized world that we live in, that is increasingly digitalized, data has become one of the most valuable and strategic resources. As a result, the way in which we manage and protect this data has profound consequences, not only for the economy, but also for security, privacy, and human rights. This panel on data governance, which is aligning Latin America with the G20, is reflecting on the urgent need that we have to develop governance frameworks for data that are coherent and collaborative at a global level. The interconnection of our economies and digital societies demands that we become closer in our efforts so that data can be managed in a safe, equitable, and ethic way. When we think of data governance, we are thinking about policies and norms which consider the storage, use, and protection of this data. This concept covers several dimensions regarding information security and people's privacy, and also the availability and integrity of this data. Data governance is not only a technical issue, it is also ethical and legal. Now, the use of data can lead to violations in privacy, discrimination, and other issues, which means we need to have a robust framework for its governance. An effective governance of data can bring us significant benefits, such as improvements in operational efficiency, the creation of new products and services, and the capacity to make informed and precise decisions. Besides its economic implications, data governance has a direct impact on the protection of human rights. Personal data, when they are poorly managed or used in an inappropriate way, can compromise the privacy and security of individuals. We have seen recent issues with data breaches that have highlighted the urgent need to protect personal data and the need for respecting human rights. At a global level, we are seeing several key trends in data governance. These include, first of all, more and more regulatory frameworks for protecting data. Second, an increase in global cooperation in cybersecurity. Number three, the expansion of the use of advanced technologies such as AI and machine learning. The European Union has been a pioneer in establishing strict standards for the use and recompilation of personal data and has served as a model for other jurisdictions. We have seen the recent publishing of the regulation of AI, and in Latin America, countries such as Brazil, our host, Mexico as well, are following this trend, establishing robust legal frameworks for data protection. International agencies such as the UN are also playing a critical role and facilitating this cooperation in adopting better standards and practices internationally to harmonize the use of data and also facilitating the ethical and secure use of information in different countries. Global problems need to be addressed with global solutions. Today, technology is advancing quickly. We have AI, blockchain, and others that are changing the way in which we use data today. These technologies offer opportunities for development and innovation, but also pose new challenges for data governance. In this sense, data policies have an essential role for the digital economy as they establish rules for the collection, use, and protection of data. A well-designed data policy can support innovation and economic growth and at the same time protect the rights of individuals. These policies must be flexible so they can adapt to the quick technological evolution and robust to protect us from these privacy violations. Now, what happens in Latin America? Latin America is in a challenging moment regarding data protection. This region has great diversity and faces unique challenges and significant opportunities in the protection and management of data. The digitalization is advancing quickly in many countries of the region, boosted by the expansion of the connectivity to the internet, the adoption of emerging technologies as well. However, this digitalization also highlights the urgent need to develop robust data governance models that are coherent as well. Many countries in Latin America are developing specific legislations for data protection. For example, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, which was the first country to adopt legislation on data protection in 2000, in the year of 2000, and which is undergoing profound changes currently. Chile is also working on this, Colombia, Uruguay, which is currently strengthening its national legislation to continue advancing and looking at the GDPR status. We can see significant variations in terms of the coverage of these legislations, and this creates challenges for interoperability and regional coherence. There are also several initiatives for data governance at a regional level. The Ibero-American Network of Data Protection on one hand, the Organization of Ibero-American States with its principles. On the other hand, the UN has also supported the creation of standards in this sense. Personally, as the rapporteur, we have dedicated our efforts to analyze in detail safeguards to the protection of personal data. We have looked at different solutions that are being presented globally, and of course, they are not enough at this time. As we can see, there are several initiatives to harmonize data policies and to help the cooperation between Latin American countries. We are seeking to share best practices and to establish common standards. What are the challenges we can see today? Firstly, we can speak about digital inequality. Despite the advancements in connection, there are still significant digital gaps in the countries. The lack of access to digital services and technologies limits the capacity of several communities to access the benefits of the digital economy. The second point has to do with institutional capacities. Many governmental institutions do not have the necessary resources and capacities to implement these policies for data protection in an effective way. There's a lack of personnel with the necessary capacities, supervision mechanisms, and technologies. In third place, we have a lack of a privacy culture. We need to raise awareness and educate people on the importance of the protection of personal data, and we need to adopt these privacy practices, which many times are not prioritized in the country. Number 4, legal harmonization. This is a consequence of the difference between the countries, and this creates barriers for regional cooperation and makes it difficult to implement coherent and effective policies. This lack of harmonization can also make it difficult to follow the regulations, specifically for countries operating in several countries in the region. Despite these challenges, Latin America has significant opportunities to advance in data governance.
The region is seeing a peak in the technological innovation and the digital entrepreneurship. Supporting these trends with robust frameworks of data governance can leverage the economic growth and the competitiveness of the region. And how this issue to align of G20. G20 represents the main economies of the world, developed and developing, performing an important role in the formulation of global policies. In the last few years, G20 emphasized the data governance, recognizing its importance for the digital economy and the protection of human rights. The G20 goals and data governance are centered in fundamental pillars. It promotes the creation of interoperable regulatory frameworks that facilitate the cross-boundary flow of data. The harmonization of these regulations is critical to minimize the trade barriers and make sure the data can move in a safe and efficient manner between the jurisdictions. A key approach is to make sure the personal data are protected globally and adequately, and that includes the adoption of principles and common principles for the protection of as the GDPR from European Union. Another pillar is the protection against cyber threats, essentially for the data governance. And G20 works on the strengthening of the international cooperation in cybersecurity, promoting policies and practices that can protect critical infrastructures and data from cyber attacks. And it's we need to include the digital inclusion, making sure that every individual have access to the benefits of the digital economy. That includes the reduction of the digital gap and the empowerment of marginalized groups facing the access of technology and digital education, aligning the policies of data governance that Latin America and G20 has offers many benefits, including the strengthening of the local economies, the strengthening of the citizens' rights, and the increase of global competitiveness of the region. The alignment to the standards and practices of G20 can also attract investments, foreign investments, and foster the technological industry in Latin America. Concluding, and as a final reflection, we can say that data governance is transformed into a fundamental pillar for the economic and social development in the digital age. As Latin America is more integrated in the global digital economy, we have the necessity of a robust data governance framework, and it becomes more urgent. We understand that aligning the policies and data governance frameworks in Latin America with the G20 is not only a smart strategy, but also it is necessary to make sure the region can compete and collaborate in a more and more interconnected world. The countries of the region have the opportunity to become worldwide leaders in the data protection and privacy. At the same time that they promote the economic growth and the sustainable development. And these needs to be shared and a coordinated effort to implement policies and practice that benefits all the citizens. Finally, I invite all the governments, companies and organizations and civil societies and citizens from Latin America to work together in order to build a data governance framework that is inclusive, fair, and effective. Only through cooperation and the commitment we can face the challenges of the digital era and harness fully its advantages. The data protection and privacy, it's not only a legal obligation, but also a responsibility, an ethical responsibility that we can assume collectively to guarantee the future, the safe and equitable digital future. Of course, we are in this line, and I want to thank and recognize the efforts made to join everyone here to discuss this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna, for highlighting the obligation to work together in order to advance in a sustainable data governance. I just want to say that while we were doing the work to map the practices of data transference and suggestions of potential clues, in March this year, the Inter-American Human Rights Court adopted an important sentence, an important award in the case of Cajal against Colombia, that he speaks explicitly of the American Convention of Human Rights. You can derive an autonomous rights of informative self-determination. This is the first time in Latin America, and this is a critical point that needs to be considered for our debate. The Inter-American Court speaks explicitly that we need to build a normative and institutional framework for the use of these rights. So our responsibility, as Anna said, to create this framework is the right way to go. Thank you very much, Anna. Now I'll pass the floor to the Director President, Valdemar Gonçalves. Welcome once again. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank the organization of the event for one more invitation to open the CPDP LatAm. It's very good for us from ANPD when we attend these conferences and we discuss personal data. I want to congratulate the tribute to our late Danilo Daneda, our friend who passed away 2 years ago, and the results of his work and his dedication. The data protection continues flourishing more and more. I want to salute my fellow members of the table and everyone who is present here in person or online. I would like to express in this short period that we have to discuss the data protection in Brazil. Today, we talk about the artificial intelligence, and the National Data Protection Authority participated since the beginning of these agreements. Our direction, Miriam Wimmer, participated in the commission of the Senate that produced, along with other 50 experts, an extensive document of more than 900 pages that was the base of the Bill of Law 3338. This Bill of Law, we saw its contents and it called our attention the similarity of many points with the activities of ANPD written in our General Data Protection Regulation. We drafted a preliminary study. We directed this study to the Commission and for the execution of some webinars discussing extensively this topic. And we saw that regardless of technology, when we include the personal data issue, it is an activity of the authority. The work that we followed with our rapporteur Eduardo Gomes, our senator, that he was leading the Bill of Law 2338, he considered all the regulator agencies, all the bodies that had sectorial activities and with ANPD, with a more cross-cutting activities. And in his final report, he came up with a solution considering all the sectorial bodies and ANPD, the National Data Protection Authority, as the central body for these activities. And we have supported and followed all this work. It is still being voted, but regardless of the decision, the authority will always defend the data holders regarding privacy and personal data, and regardless of the technology that is being employed. We want to make it really clear that the Data Protection Authority is not to block the use of technology, it's not against innovation. It's quite the opposite. It wants to encourage new technologies to emerge and operate for the benefits of the population. Innovation is something that we encourage, and we want to have new tools that will follow the compliances, will follow the provision of consent from the data holders, everything in favor of something better for everyone. We support the use of new technologies and the new systems coming from innovation companies, but always respecting the personal data of their holders or their users in compliance with the General Data Protection Regulation. The Data Protection Authority experienced based on these cross-cutting aspects we had during all this work where we had, for example, a national board of data protection with 23 board members, 23 backup members involving all the sectors, government, society, academia, uh, labor organizations. It is an expertise of the Data Protection Authority, and soon we will have a meeting. It will be the first meeting of the board that took office a few days ago. So this complete work is our expertise, is our daily routine, the dialogue that we have with all the sectors, the society, in the academia, in the publication of a norm is an activity that shows the transparency and the overture that the authority has in terms of releasing any law or any document. Worse than not releasing a norm in record time is to release something that is not requested by society. One of our norms, we have an innovation in international terms where the analysis of regulatory results. When we put together a norm, we calculated the impact of this norm that is going to cause in the society, and after its launch, after its enactment, after some periods, we will check if this impact was reached, if this norm deserves to be readjusted or reenacted in a general way. So the Data Protection Authority is always vigilant about this, even with a poor structure. Some people say that we don't have the sufficient infrastructure. We don't have, nobody has this sufficient structure nowadays. For artificial intelligence, we need people who are qualified in the subject. We need more people and more structure and more budget that matches the size of this mission. The Data Protection Authority cherishes this dialogue and this communication in all of the events that we had the opportunity to attend. We take the moments of the event to launch some new action of the authority. And now in our official journal, we published the norm of the employees. This was the norm that we had the most contribution of society in general. We had more than 1,400 contributions, and that causes some delay in the publication because we need to consider all of the contributions. But today we published this important norm and expected by everyone, and we see the role of the data officer in the data protection system. This is the person that has access to all the data operators, to the directors of the company, and they communicate with the data holder and talk to the authority. So this is an important position in this context of data protection.
Data Protection Authority will have its first meeting with data officers. You are all invited. It will be happening online. And we originally opened it up for an in-person event, actually. We opened it up for applications on midnight, and at 7 a.m. we were already at full capacity in the auditorium, but you can also watch it online, and we will be sharing the link with you all shortly. Congratulations for organizing this event. It's very important for us to discuss these issues, and I'm sure that the next 2 days will be very successful with these presentations. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Valdemar. It is important to see the National Data Protection Authority participating in this debate about building a regulatory framework for AI. And you are also pioneers in creating the sandbox for AI, which will be very useful for testing out innovations in an initial stage. And it's also important for the regulators to follow the evolution of these innovations with auditing, monitoring. So the Data Protection Authority will be an essential player in the AI ecosystem. Having said that, now one of the companies in Latin America that uses data for AI is Mercado Livre. And we have here with us the data protection officer for Mercado Livre. So I will pass the floor to our dear Samantha Oliveira. You have 8 to 10 minutes. Good morning, everybody. It's a huge pleasure to be here with such excellent professionals that I admire. And I want to start by thanking you for inviting me here. I want to congratulate Luca and Nico for the excellent work you have been promoting over these past few years with these debates, and for Mercado Livre. It's wonderful to be able to share some of the work that we have done internally, and we are truly proud and happy to be able to present this and share this. I am here speaking about privacy operations in Brazil. Our director is also very honored and happy. We have some team members who are present here. So we understand it is an excellent opportunity for us. I have the challenge of speaking about what a company in Latin America that is present in 18 jurisdictions, 18 countries, what this company perceives under a very practical perspective regarding data governance. This is something really important, and of course it has to do with AI, and we know that AI cannot exist without data privacy and protection, because data is this information that becomes the knowledge that AI then offers. So I have 6 quick topics to address here, 1 per minute basically. Let me see if I can manage to do this on time. So privacy and security, that is our first point. It is quite a challenge. And I think it is a challenge that involves everybody that works with personal data. It is not exclusive to the private sector. The public sector has this concern as well. And it is important because it reveals a concern that we have with data protection. We have our security protection program that is very close with the privacy area, and we have these interactions with the data protection authority in terms of security and incidents. Now, regarding privacy and security, we also have a huge concern, a practical perspective on anonymity, and we will have a panel today that will speak about this, more specifically discussing data, how we protect the data, the anonymity, these different techniques that involve this. And this brings me to another item in this topic, which has to do with data quality. So to process and generate all of this intelligence, and here I'm speaking about Mercado Livre specifically, we're very proud to be one of the quickest deliveries shipping options in Brazil. And I think you as users, I hope you have seen this experience of receiving your items quickly in your homes. When we see our website, we have 6,000 searches on our website. So we're in 5th place in terms of the most accessed websites in Brazil, 140 transactions per second on our e-commerce platform, and 40 sales process within our Mercado Pago digital bank. So, of course, we need to be concerned about governance, and governance for us means privacy and security, and also the quality of the information. I need information because I need to generate this intelligence. So, data generates information, information generates knowledge, and this generates these big numbers that I have just shared with you. And then, of course, we're looking at precision and protecting all of this, considering anonymity, security programs, and a well-built protection data program that generates the governance we expect. And of course, this is not possible if we do not have compliance and regulations. Anna spoke brilliantly about the importance of harmonization between norms and international cooperation, as well as the establishment of global standards under this super coordination. And it's important for all organizations to be involved in this integrated ecosystem. We were all born in different regions, but we all travel, and we want to see these brands, these companies in other countries, in other jurisdictions. We want to see them operating and working, and therefore this database, of course, is involved in several international transactions, and it is quite a challenge to be a company operating in several jurisdictions with one database and being compliant around the world, following all of these governance rules. Now, speaking of AI, a challenge that comes up has to do with this governance that we see. Thinking of big blocks, we have Europe, the US, China, and now Latin America as well. As Valdemar has mentioned, we have our Bill of Law, which is quite advanced, so that we can have better legal security. And it's great to be here with you sharing this and speaking of this governance. And we are anxious to see this legislation. Now, the user experience, that of course is very connected to the security. So we want the user to trust us, and they won't trust us if we don't have transparency, if we can't be in communication with these data holders, if they don't understand that we continuously monitor all of our models that process personal data, and that we handle this in this way in the companies. So we have a report to verify the performance of our algorithm and the quality of data, which I just mentioned, which is a concern for all of those that work with data, so that we can avoid any issues that have to do with the discrimination or harmful biases. And so we, of course, avoid this kind of incident, and we use our governance for this. Infrastructure and scalability, I'm going to speak a little bit more technically here. I want to highlight the investments that the company makes in order to reach these objectives. And of course, this has costs, and Mercado Libre is perceived as really, of course, having to invest in this very robust structure so we can have a scalability for our products and a healthy ecosystem for all of Latin America. And this management that I commented, which of course has to do with the aspect of scalability and needs all of this care. And the fifth point, now heading to the end, I want to, of course, keep your attention, and we want to listen to our colleagues. This has to do with capacity building and talent. It is a big challenge because AI is something very new, of course, especially when we compare it with more traditional areas like law, for example, right? And so how can we find qualified professionals specifically in data science and AI? There are not many professionals, and therefore we need to really be watching this in order to develop these capacities and abilities, and so that our talents stick with us, and so that they stay in our jurisdictions and countries, and so they can help us advance around the world. That is very important as well. Now, finishing with my sixth point that I wanted to share, and it is last but not least, but actually a message of hope that I wanted to finish with, that has to do with incentives and innovations. So we hope And we wish that our laws and regulations that are so necessary for legal security, which allow us to invest in a safe and protective manner, we expect this to also support innovation, innovation in research and development, innovation for, let's say, perhaps tax benefits. But it's important for us to have this item within the topics that we discuss, and for this to have scalability, and Brazil to continue being this important actor and to expand from the G20 to the world. And that's it. That's what I had to say. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much, Samantha, for highlighting Mercado Libre's priorities, right? A Latin American company that is very successful even in the way that it perceives data governance. I also want to highlight that what Samantha said on this interest on a Latin American harmonization, it's not just something that is regarding the rights that we are addressing through this harmonization. It also has to do with a business perspective, right? Mercado Libre has to follow 18 different laws in Latin America. It's quite a nightmare. I mean, of course, if you're a big company like Mercado Libre, you can do that, but a small startup will never be able to follow and be compliant with all of these different laws, even though they're quite similar, right? Because many of them have been inspired by the European model. So we have started treading this path because in Latin America there have been several public national debates, and we all want to adopt data protection, but we need to go further and promote this harmonization. To speak about global debates and what is happening internationally, and specifically in the G20, how we can create these connections between the national dimension and the G20. We have here Luana Honcarache, who is leading all of these debates and many of the Brazilian initiatives and its presidency in the G20. So Luana, the floor is yours. Well, thank you for your kind words, Luca. I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me here. So it's great to have this opportunity to share a little bit about the work that Brazil has been doing, that the federal government has been doing. So I want to thank Luca and Nico for this opportunity. I'm really happy to be here with you all. Good morning. And actually, before I get into the G20 and our international initiatives, I want to contextualize a little bit about how we've been working. I represent here the Ministry of Management and Innovation and Public Services, which is a new ministry. It's fairly new. It was created in 2023 with this mission to support all of the organizations of the federal government to deliver better public policies and better services to the population. So it is a very robust mission. It's a huge mission. And this means we have very significant operations, thinking of the federal government. So one of the ways of thinking of these changes, of conducting this transformation and thinking of the future, well, of course, it has a lot to do with technology. And then we have the Secretariat of Digital Government, where I work as well, that has this mission of promoting and supporting the transformation of the state through technologies, using digital technologies, not only the existing ones, but also thinking about future opportunities that have to do with emerging technologies and what they can offer to us. So today, our activities, our actions, they involve the coordination of the more than 250 organizations related to the federal government that have actions, public policies. And well, as you can imagine, it's quite complex because we're speaking about very diverse public policies for a very diverse country that is very complex and that faces important challenges in all sectors.
And so what we are doing is to provide the conditions and to come up with the conditions and discuss without these bodies, the proper conditions and what is possible to do. So we are bringing these reflections about considerations and guidelines and technological platforms and solutions to make it easier. So always with this look at the people who use the service and they need the public policies that we provide. So today, the scenario that we have nowadays is the development of a few tools and important solutions that will work comprehensively all over the government that their necessities were coming about, and we were adapting to their necessities with the use of this technology with the objective to transform and deliver better services. We realized that it was possible to automate the services for this delivery, but some other natural challenges in this context were coming, and we tried to respond as quickly as possible to meet the necessities of our population. And one of the necessities was the digital identity, the the account gov.br, because working in a digital environment you need necessarily to identify people and to make possible so they can authenticate themselves. So we have the gov.br account. We have more than 158 million people in Brazil using the gov.br account and being able to access more than 4,000 services available in digital channels. So from the gov.br account and all the digital transformation, we have the possibility of use the data and the importance of the use of this data and the quality, and to work to have even more quality in this data so it's possible to have interoperability, so it makes possible a program for the interoperability that is the connect.gov.br to have many services using and being able to use available databases in the government to facilitate and to simplify so people don't need to present documents many different times that the government already has. So this is to improve the experience and to facilitate the journey of the people in this transaction of this with the state. And having done this context, I think we can say how our international work is going. So considering all this scenario and all these opportunities and challenges that we have in the government, and getting to know all the potential of the transformation through these technologies, we reached 2024 with the presidency of the G20 having followed all the previous presidencies and everything that was debated, and the federal government defined some priorities. One of the priority is to fight poverty and social inclusion, and in the G20 groups there are other priorities, of course, but this is the ones that communicate with our debates today. So we bring to the digital economy group the priority of social inclusion that is related directly with this priority of social inclusion. And in this group of digital economy, in the Indian presidency that preceded Brazilians, the public digital infrastructure was very present, and also with a close link to what we are doing in Brazil and the relevance of recognizing this discussion for Brazil. So we make the reflection on the priorities of this group in Brazil as well. So this group has as a line that links all the priorities the subject of digital inclusion that unfolds into four main lines of the work of this group. One is social inclusion in connectivity, meaningful connectivity. The second one is digital government, with the link with the discussion of public digital infrastructures, connecting with the previous presidency to construct what was being done in the previous presidencies. The third item is related to the integrity of the information and discussion about misinformation and fake news. And the fourth one is the discussion about artificial intelligence, but towards the capacity that the countries need to better use these new technologies. Regarding the priority of digital government and the discussion about digital public infrastructures, the path that we thought was more interesting to advance in this discussion is to bring the discussion about the components of the concept of DPI. So in the G20, it was focused the concept, it was a new concept, even though we knew that in Brazil, in other countries, this concept was already being applied. There was a feeling of the necessity of a strategic look to work that like this with an universal look and structuring initiatives. And with this conceptual discussion, our choice was to bring a discussion about the components. So from the recognition that some components are important for this discussion, one for digital identity and other for sharing of data and the use of data as a strategy for the DPIs, and the third one's linked to digital payments that was strongly focused in India. So these are components that communicate with the Brazilian reality. So in our case, we have an advance of the PIX payments, instant payments, the gov.br account with this digital approach, and we bring to the current context of the new ID, national ID cards, connecting our physical documents and the digital documents, and the data sharing that is important to us, and it is really present not only with the legislative discussion that is happening, but also a relevance inside the government, but in the companies and in general. So we focused in these two streams, identity and data sharing, because the payment has a different group dealing with financial subjects, and we are working with two main products. One is focused on the recognition and the agreement of high-level services of data governance that we had a discussion in many international organisms about this, but not inside the G20. So we bring an important message, an important symbolism of the recognition of the relevance of digital identities and common principles that can be defined and can serve as a guide to other countries that and haven't advanced in this path. And another one that is focused on the best practices of access and data sharing inside the public sector, among public institutions and different sectors with the private sector as well for the public interest. So we brought this discussion, understanding that it is relevant to come up with a consensus and provide visibility to this discussion, and this is what the G20 countries are doing. And we also try to inspire ourselves and how to do this in Brazil and to enhance this in Brazil, especially in the case of the federal government. Lastly, I just want to highlight two other points that are important about our context. As significant efforts and the concept of DPI brings an important value that we are making an effort to make a construction and to reach states and municipalities in these movements of digital transformation, especially talking about public sector. We know that there is a disparity between the federal governments and the subnational governments. So we made this construction and we understand that the DPI logics of large systems of data sharing and structuring that allow an interoperability and a sharing and integration of systems is important. So we are doing this work, and recently we published the National Strategy of Digital Government in the format of a decree, and we bring the concept of digital public infrastructures inside this decree, recognizing the relevance for the Brazilian context. Now, talking about Latin America, this year we are presiding, or we are going to preside the ministry meeting of GALC network. There are the ministries to work in the electronic governments in Latin America. So this is a multilateral space where we debate, we have important technical debates, and we debate the recognition of digital identities, the recognition of signature. So we are doing an important exercise inside Mercosur about this, and this year we are receiving this event that will take place in November. We have the CLAD event as well in another date, and both events will take place in Brasilia. So there is a debate with Latin America that we are doing, and we are contributing and participating. And lastly, I want to say that next week we have States of the Future event organized here as a parallel event to the G20, organized by the MDI with important international experts who are going to participate and contribute to this reflection of how the state machine can prepare itself to deal with complex problems that we have using the emerging technologies that are available. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Luana. It's really interesting to see Brazil leading internationally the region with digital identity solutions and digital identity governance. I want to emphasize the importance of the gov.br account. My personal experience in the beginning of the pandemic, thanks to the gov.br website, I could travel all over the world showing my certificates, and it was recognized in other countries. A challenge that I see ahead of us is the evolution of the gov.br is to integrate other components. Nowadays, one of the topics that we debate is the digitization of the digital health. We have two panels dedicated to the digitization of health. We have our secretary the secretary data officer of the Ministry of Health, Adriana, and I think this is one of the topics that Brazil can lead and to generate partnerships and alliances regionally. Now, going from digital transformation in the public sector to the private sector, one of the companies that is largely affected by the revolution of generative AI in one of the sectors is the media, traditional mainstream media. This is where we have a representative of a company that is the media conglomerates in Brazil, the global. So we have the pleasure to welcome Andrea Sad, that is not only the legal director but also the data protection officer of Global. So it would be interesting to hear from you, Andrea, how the generative AI is impacting from the content scratching and the production of media by the generative AI and other challenges related to AI. So you have the floor now.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to thank Professors Luca and Nicolo for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a PowerPoint. Could you please project it? And of course, I want to greet the other members of this discussion panel. I will focus on this topic that actually was mentioned by everybody who spoke before me, but I will be speaking more about AI in the media market. So I want to start with a brief history. AI is more generally defined as a technology that can conduct tasks that would generally demand human intelligence. This is not new, actually, for our market. It has been used by us for quite a long time, since the early 2000s. At that time, it was still quite simple technology used for basic tasks. So for managing our digital files and archives, something that had been growing exponentially since the early 2000s. And as this developed, we started using it for more complex tasks. We started using AI for improving, for example, the visual effects of our videos, and also to obtain insights on the behaviors and preferences of our consumers. And today, this is the base for directed ads, which is one of the main forms of revenue for the media industry today. So AI is not something new to us. However, the great revolution, in my opinion, happened at the end of 2022 with the popularization of AI, and specifically generative AI. Why? Because the main characteristic of generative AI is production, the production of texts, photos, songs, images. So, of course, this technology can be and is already being very useful for the industry. We have already been using this technology for many different things. We identify, for example, what to write in journalism, scripts, editing, subtitling, dubbing. So we have found many different uses for this. The second point is that without a doubt, AI has allowed the media industry to become more innovative, efficient, creative. That is the good side of this story. Now, the fact is that this technology also poses many risks, not just legal risks, but ethical risks. So I want to mention some of the risks that are relevant to our world, the media world. First of all, the crisis of public confidence or trust. We know that this technology can create many different lies by altering voices, images, and then the difference between what is the truth and what is not, it becomes more and more subtle because AI has been used as a tool to disseminate fake news. And what is the problem here? Well, it will worsen this crisis of confidence of the public, not just regarding the media, but regarding science, politicians, academia. And in this context, we see the strengthening of this polarization in our societies, this growth of a feeling of hate towards journalisms, and very bizarre movements, right? Like the flat earthers, those that are against vaccines. And this reliability and trust is a huge asset for the media world, but it's also important for our democracies. And we need to think of the Latin American context. Here we have young democracies, and therefore they are more susceptible to attacks and to this worsening of the crisis of the confidence of the public regarding institutions. Now, another point here. What is the role of writers, actors, script writers in generative AI? Is there still space for human creativity in this world? I think yes. We will always need people to create content that is truly captivating, emotional, and that can connect with the public. But this is a huge debate. It's very controversial, and I think we need to address this now. Finally, a risk to the business models of the media industry. Here, I think we need to consider the Latin American context that has been suffering specifically with this crisis, this confidence crisis that has affected the media. And there are several regions in Latin America that have no journalistic coverage because they cannot sustain themselves economically. So we need to think of a business model, of course, and about copyrights. We know that today what is being offered here They have been trained with content that was protected by copyright, and they did not obtain any kind of authorization, and the authors did not receive anything after their content was used by AI. And then we know that the content generated by AI competes with this original content. So this needs to be addressed as well. Another aspect within the business model point that I think needs to be more mentioned is how AI has been used to deepen the dominance of big techs. We know that the big techs today have the financial capacity, the tech capacity, and the data volume that is necessary to generate the most powerful AI tools. So what we have seen today is that these developers, they either conduct partnerships with big tech like OpenAI with Microsoft, or they are developing their own tools, the big techs, which is the case with Google. What is the problem with this? For many years, we have been competing heavily with big techs. On one hand, for the attention of the users, and on the other hand, for ads. And the competition in itself is not a problem, but this is very unequal competition because the platforms, they benefit from regulatory asymmetries. This is very important. And they frequently adopt anti-competitive behaviors that are not detected by the antitrust authorities. So the point here is that AI is becoming another niche for the big techs to continue with their dominance and to make other companies more and more dependent on them. So I know now I've spoken about many problems, many dilemmas. Do we have solutions? Yes, I think so. But there's not a one size fits all solution here. We need a combination of measures. Of course, the first one is the most obvious one, regulations. It is essential for us to have regulations for AI. And here I'm speaking about topics that are very important for the media industry. We need regulations that demand transparency for these tools. The content needs to be labeled in a way to mitigate the risks of disseminating fake news. And of course, this protects the copyright of the works that are used to train these tools. We know that today we have bills in Congress, these bills of law that propose some of these points that I'm mentioning here. But I want to mention this once again because we really need to remember this throughout the legislative debate that is happening and that will continue happening until we finally have a regulatory framework. Another important point that I think that has to do with regulation is that we need to have more assertive antitrust initiatives in relation to big techs. We need to look at these actions that involve big techs, the investigations that have to do with anti-competitive behaviors from these companies, and now we need to look specifically at AI in order to avoid what I just mentioned. We cannot allow big techs to use AI as another niche so they can deepen their dominance and have companies be more and more dependent on them. The final point, which I think is not only legislative, it's not only something for governments, it has to do with companies as well. Media companies and all other companies that work with AI, they need to be structured to have an AI governance. They need to establish principles in terms of ethics, internal processes and policies. Their collaborators need to be adequately trained. They need to be committed with transparency in terms of their public. And at Global, we are putting together our governance. We have advanced quite a bit. These are some measures that more recently have become very visible. In the case of the documentary about the Air France accident, this was a transparency measure that we used AI for dubbing some of those who were interviewed using their own voices. And more recently, we updated our editorial principles. If you know about these principles, They are very traditional, and we thought it was very important to update them to include how our journalism has been using AI. So, my last message here is that, we need to consider regulations and these essential structures that we need to deal with the AI world. The companies also need to get organized to deal with AI in a structured manner. We know that this technology has amazing benefits, but the risks are proportional to the benefits. And the other point is that this technology, it is advancing at an uncomparable pace, and we need to be watching this. We can't wait for the regulatory framework. Companies need to be watching this. There are other regulations that can be applied to AI. We already have some that exist, and we need to use them and be conscious of this. And that's it. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, it really is a combination of solutions. There is not a one size fits all solution. We're not reinventing the wheel here. There are many things that can be used, implemented, and that should be implemented, actually. Now, actually, something that you said that I really liked, that that has to do with something we have discussed a lot regarding sovereignty in AI and how this is concentrated, the infrastructure of this world. Many people don't realize this, right? That basically any company, institution, or government around the world that wants to develop AI, they depend on basically three companies, right? AWS, Amazon, Google Cloud, Microsoft, right? That have 70% of this market of platform and infrastructures as a service. So AI is basically three companies, right? And they all depend on NVIDIA for the necessary structures. So this market is very concentrated. And maybe one of the strategies to break this is to use more digital public infrastructures. That is something that our friend Armando Manzueta has been leading in the Dominican Republic for many years. So it is a pleasure to have Armando with us. Armando, the floor is yours.
I would like to thank Luca and the team here of FTV for organizing this incredible event, and also have the privilege and the honor to be part of this team of incredible panelists in this morning. Well, regarding the digital public infrastructure, I think it was already mentioned in the last 2 years, since the options of G20, where they contemplate the use of this infrastructure as catalyst of digital development. But we have a lot of confusion about what a digital public infrastructure is and what is its reach. In general, as we are seeing, it is a digital public infrastructure. It's nothing but a series of platforms, digital platforms that based on a set of norms and standards and governance mechanisms and ecosystems that can have development and evolution, they serve to provide public services in a better way and also add value to the society. In a broader sense, as it was mentioned in some of the conversations, it was seen in the three main means: the data structure regarding the data exchange. The second one is the digital identity that we limit to the national works, but we can also speak about authentication and mechanisms in order to validate the compliance and so on. And the third one is the payment that has a strong relation with what would be digital identity because of the bunkerization of the financial use, and it is connected with the international agenda that can emerge in the future. The critical thing for a digital public infrastructure to reach its objective and to transform the society resides in the capacity of the states to adopt it, meaning not only the capacity of the government to be able to adopt this structure and to adjust the necessities, etc., but also the people can use it in their daily lives. And in order to reach that, it is critical that the infrastructure can generate sufficient trust to be adopted by people. And the proper way to generate trust can be twofold. From one side, the group of norms that can contemplate these key issues regarding data protection, personal data protection, and the ownership of data and the cybersecurity, and many other administrative controls. And also from the technological perspective, that these normative considerations needs to be not only cosmetics as characteristics of the structure, but inside the source codes of the functionality and the way that the solution is designed. We have to integrate all these items. For example, you can say that there are five key elements of the perspective. It should be interoperable, it should be open, it should be reusable, and when we say openness and reusability, is that the source codes, ideally, not in all the cases, but they have to be totally open. If they are not open, they have to be sufficiently documented so that people can have the technical awareness and they can integrate them in their solutions and be sure that what is happening internally is not a black box, so to speak, and we can have this control on this issue. And it has to be inclusive. So it is inclusive with the capacity to generate ecosystems that will facilitate the development and the maintenance of the government and the actors of the private sector. And finally, they have to be private and safe from the technical perspective. With that, there are two examples here. When we get a DPI of a digital identity, the first point is that we need to find a way that we do not store the personal data of the people, that when you consult the data is in the source and does not generate a copy because you don't need to have any traceability. But at the same time, all the concept of data minimization can be used by the platform itself. So you avoid having to give all types of information. It is the minimum information sufficient to provide the services. If we can go even further, we need to find a way to establish consent mechanisms so the user can granularly say until what extent they are going to give their information and what information should be shared or not. And that leads to the point of DPI and data exchange when you talk about interoperability. And the platform of our work, of the work of our governments, it is in the level of consent and the way that is the data is generated, because the data is separated in now all the points, and all the points within the same ecosystems have elements that allow to validate if the person that is requesting the information have the consent to be able to enter that database, and if the person needs an authentication for that. So these type of elements are critical so we can create a DPI that is safe, that is friendly, user friendly, and also generate this trust. So I think this is how we have to work. Thank you, Armando. I'll speak in Portuguese. I believe that the digital public infrastructure is really something that we need to build regarding artificial intelligence as well. When you were listing some of the characteristics, I was thinking about the AI open source that could be made available to citizens to perform many types of activities that benefit society. Yes, as I mentioned, even if in the beginning we contemplate these three types of DPIs, it is not a restrainer. I'm talking to one of my colleagues here in the working group of DPIs. We were talking about the possibility that in the future there will be elements that will be considered as DPIs. So, for example, Center for Digital Public Infrastructures, that was a wide variety that could be called artificial intelligence, and many of the principles that we are adopting, they are not new. These are something that is being done in the development of the source codes. When we talk about solutions, that's one way or the other the governments are adopting. Certainly, I just want to add that the big challenge is to define what is open in an AI open source. What does open mean? Because as we said here, the challenge to concentrate power here is something is open, but you need to access the infrastructure of only a few companies. This is an infrastructure challenge that needs to be addressed with a discussion that goes along with the digital public infrastructure. Now, going to the topic of acceleration of sustainable innovation and inclusive innovation, we have here the representative of the Digital Cooperation Organization, Ahmad Binder, that has this purpose to accelerate the growth of digital economy and paying attention to the innovation, sustainable innovation and inclusive innovation points. And I want to highlight that later we have 15 minutes for questions and answers. So be prepared because we'll pass the floor to the audience. Ahmad, you have the floor now.
Hi, good afternoon. No, it's still morning. Good, good morning, everybody. First of all, I congratulate the translators for doing an excellent job in translating for me all the nice points that have been made here. And it's really, really inspiring for me. And sorry for speaking in English because that's the only language I can speak that people will probably understand here. So my name is Ahmed Bhinder. I come from a digital cooperation organization. Uh, and I really, really thank the organizers, FGV, for bringing me all the way from Riyadh here, just a short 26 hours journey, to really know and learn a lot of perspectives that I have witnessed today on data governance, on AI, and this is a true spirit, the international cooperation. So let me start by introducing the DCO, the organization that I represent here. It is an intergovernmental international organization that focuses on sustainable growth of digital economy. It has 16 member states so far, very rapidly growing. 2 years ago, the organization started from 6 member states, and now we are 16. We span across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Hopefully, Latin American countries soon will be a part of the organization. And we represent around 800 million people and $3.5 trillion in the GDP. So the DCO brings together government, private sectors, international organizations, NGOs, civil society to enable more inclusive digital transformation and to promote the ethical and human-centric use of technologies such as AI, thereby enabling digital prosperity for all. And in this effort, we are joined by a growing network of observers. FGV, the organization invites us, is a part of that network as well. And this constitute academia, NGOs, private sector, and civil society institutions. So our agenda for DCO is driven by a strategic roadmap for 2030, which has three overarching goals. Number one, empowering businesses across the DCO member states in a cross-border digital market to thrive the global digital economy. Leveraging the full potential of data across the DCO ecosystem and fostering inclusive, human-centric, and sustainable digital economy. So we focus horizontally over the digital economy and across the sectors. To achieve this, the DCO plays the critical role as facilitator of businesses across the DCO membership. We play a role of information providers to provide state-of-the-art information to our network, advisor to our member states, and we are the advocates of best practice policies. So this is about DCO. We have our website. I would be more than happy to discuss and explain more about the organization. So we all know that the data is a key element in digital economy, and it is enabled by, its flows are enabled by the public and private initiatives. And the global data transfers are increasing exponentially. In fact, in the 10 years from 2012 to 2022, global data traffic has increased from 17,000 Gbps to 153,000 Gbps. So we have been talking about a lot about the privacy, about how to govern data in the domestic domains. Today, my focus and the work of my organization is to enable the free flow of cross-border data, but with trust. So the global data ecosystem is underpinned by three key enablers: digital infrastructure, digital platforms and services, and the enabling regulations. Digital infrastructure includes global subsea cable networks that span 1.2 million kilometers today, a rapidly expanding market for global data centers and edge computing. Digital platforms and services include social media and e-commerce markets, where e-commerce has reached 22% of the global sales in 2022 overall. And finally, the enabling regulations includes various emerging digital economy and free trade agreements with the special clauses for cross-border data flows and different interoperability mechanisms, mainly legal interoperability mechanisms that are being created to enable trusted flow of data across the borders. Today, around 79% of the countries have a data legislation in place, and another 8% are on the way of drafting them. That is the focus the world is paying to the data privacy and data legislation. This growth in the number of national and regional data governance frameworks, on one hand, underpins the importance of regulating data, and we have been talking about it the whole day. On other hand, it highlights the challenge of global community on how to maximize the opportunities from cross-border data flows while ensuring that the privacy, content regulation, and safeguarding the national security is ensured. National data governance regulations are often inspired by the motivations that include privacy, national security, content regulation, competition, and financial regulations. And these motivations vary from one nation to another. And this causes a lot of diversity in the data governance regulations across the globe. The national data governance regulations normally translate into data localization requirements in many countries, restrictions on the transfer of data to third parties and countries, consent requirements for processing data, fines and breaches on data storage, and fines for cross-border data transfer, etc. Based on their impact on the cross-border data transfers, various data governance regulations are classified into open, conditional, or limited data transfer models when it comes to the cross-border data flows. Since countries and sometimes regions have their own approach to data protection and governance, current regulations are extremely fragmented. The key challenges include varying levels of data protection regulations, complicating international data transfers, regulatory complexity, which makes it difficult for the international businesses to navigate diverse regimes, drifting legal definitions, for example, varied definition of personal data and sensitive personal data, and the other classifications of data that vary across the countries and legislations, cybersecurity threats, lack of trust and cooperation, and interoperability issues. All these challenges can only be overcome through effective multilateral and international cooperation. And that is where the organizations like DCO come into play, where we enable the dialogue between the different countries, between our member states with diverse regulations, to come up with solutions to maximize the cross-border data flows with trust. One of the solutions that have been proposed is the interoperability mechanism. Interoperability has many themes, and here I'm talking about the legal interoperability, however. These mechanisms enable cross-border data flows while respecting differences in data governance regulation. So interoperability is not premised on harmonization of data governance. Instead, it seeks to avoid data flow restrictions based merely on different approaches or means. So it takes the data governance regulations as a given, since 80% of the countries have already developed the data governance regulations, and try to find ways on how these data governance regulations can be made interoperable through different mechanisms. So different types of interoperability that are relevant to data governance are technical, that includes data formats, standards, APIs, protocols; semantic, that includes taxonomy, schemes, data models, etc., and legal, which includes equivalence regulations and model contractual clauses. There are successful examples of some of these interoperability mechanisms that have been created. For example, GDPR itself, it is a mechanism. It is legally binding for the countries that have implemented it, and it provides a framework for the flow of data to the countries that are not the EU countries. However, if you can see to date, since its enactment, there have been only 9 countries, if I am correct, around the world who have been declared adequate based on the GDPR. Then the Asia Pacific came up with a CBPR mechanism, which is cross-border privacy rules. 9 Asia Pacific countries are participating into this. It provides a privacy framework that applies to the participating countries. It establishes certain core principles for regulation for privacy, and the mechanism includes the certification of businesses through the accountability agents. So this is another attempt on enabling interoperability across for the cross-border data flows. Finally, ASEAN members MCCs, model contractual clauses, is a mechanism where 10 ASEAN states come together. It is voluntary, but it provides a framework for the ASEAN member states to include certain contractual clauses like the SECs into the agreements to enable cross-border data flows. There are a few other examples where these mechanisms are being produced or being worked on, and DCO, with its 16 member states, is trying to work on a similar interoperability mechanism. So what we have as our strength is we have reviewed the interoperability mechanisms. We are in the process of assessing the strengths and weaknesses, and we are trying to collect the positives from these mechanisms, be it the interoperability principles or it is the model contractual clauses, and we are trying to put it into a framework on where this can be put into an operation to maximize the cross-border data flows. So to conclude, the role of international cooperation in data governance is very, very important, and it is across aligning the standards and rules, It is on supporting the trusted global data flows, as I have spoken, boosting security and privacy, and ensuring ethical use of data across AI and many other applications. So I have another page to go, but I think I will conclude here. Thank you very much again for inviting me to this forum. There's a lot of learning for me, and I hope that I can discuss with my colleagues here on how DCO can best integrate different best practices on data governance and how we can make the data interoperable. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Ahmad.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. It's so interesting to see that many of the aspects that you mentioned have to do with the reflection we've been developing over this past year about the mechanisms that can facilitate a legislative operation regionally and this harmonization. Now, just a logistical message here, considering that we started 15 minutes late, we will finish 15 minutes late. Okay, so we have 15 minutes for our debate. I'm sure you all have questions, so please raise your hands. And we will have some mics around the auditorium. All right, so we'll select groups of 3 questions. If you want to direct your question to a specific person, please mention that. And avoid questions that are 5-minute comments, please. That way we can include more questions and more answers. So please be brief in your questions and answers, because we still have 3 full days to get into all of these topics. Okay, here we have one question down here, then one up there. And if anybody has a question, raise your hand. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for your valuable contributions and for the information you shared. My focus is specifically in cybersecurity. That is my activity in the Institutional Cabinet of Security. I heard several comments on different approaches that involve digital identity, the protection of personal data, the monetization of personal data, etc. But I did not hear a lot about cybersecurity, which, I have been studying this for 30 years. And I think this came before any sort of data vulnerability or fragility that we see now because of AI. So I'd like to hear comments from those of you who wish to make them about cybersecurity and its relationship with AI and data protection. I would like to ask President Valdemar how we can guarantee that we will follow our data law, but specifically small municipalities that don't have infrastructure to monitor possible violations. Did I see another hand raised up there? Okay, no? Okay, we'll start with these 2 questions. So does anybody want to talk about cybersecurity? Valdemar, would you like to start? Please feel free to do so. Okay. Cybersecurity. We have our general law on data protection, and protecting data, of course, we can improve this protection with technology. So we have technology like encrypted technology and others. So these different security aspects that we can see in the cyber world that are in databases that, of course, need to be protected, and this is essential. We see that companies, they need to look at this, consider what is relevant and what needs to be invested. For example, if I have sensitive data, that is another reason to invest in these options, these tools and devices that store sensitive data. So I think it needs to be something that is well planned. Speaking about cybersecurity, of course, it has a cost. And we don't always have the available resources to invest, so we must invest wisely. This is the IT analysis I have on this to think about what is more doable, how to invest, where to invest. So cybersecurity, data protection, they walk side by side without a doubt. About the second question, we are conscious that small municipalities in Brazil do not have many resources to invest, generally speaking. They don't have a lot of resources to be concerned with data protection, but this is necessary. And this is what we will reach with our educational initiatives. We have gotten closer to smaller municipalities. We have the National Council of Municipalities. We have been speaking to them, and we want to be present at these locations and have them understand the protection of personal data in these small municipalities, which we know perhaps they don't have that many, such a big variety of data. So I think with small actions and a reduced number of actions, we can have a big impact in these locations. And these educational initiatives are the first step here for us to arrive at these small municipalities. The first action, the first norm that the general law on data protection had to do with flexibilization for small companies, startups, where we gave them some tolerance and an extension on deadlines for them to adequate themselves to the law. It would not be reasonable to demand the same thing from a family business than from a big tech. Regarding security, your observation, there's something that I like to say, which is, it's very simple. We can't have data protection if we don't have security. So the first point is security. And once we have security, then we can start talking about data protection. And so the implementation of all of the norms and policies for data protection, they are expensive, right? Because, well, first we need to have security. And this principle is a principle, actually, that was coined by Anne Cavoquian. I don't know if you know her, but she was the alma mater of privacy. And even though she was not the person that invented design for privacy, she made this public globally. She wrote articles about this, participated in many conferences, and became very well known in designed privacy. And that is one of her principles. Sorry, I just want to use my role as moderator here to make another comment. Yes, we have the principle. We have what you just mentioned, that we don't have privacy without security, but we also have the law, right? When we develop proposals for regional frameworks, security is stated as an essential principle, right? Our data law has as its sixth principle security, and this is an essential element in the Brazilian regulatory framework. It is a criteria for evaluating data transfers. So when we speak about adequating data transfers, one of the criteria is security. So clearly, and I think it's very good to contextualize this, generally speaking, right? Okay, we have these references, different works about this, but legally we also have a solid base that we need to use.
We talked about this with Yamaguchi, but the data regulators have an essential role in explaining how the technical and administrative measures that needs to be used to guarantee or to enhance the security of information. Well, very quickly here, the issue of security is very dear to us, and it has received more and more attention from the government and from the Secretary of Digital Government to prepare and guide all the bodies so they can elevate their resilience and to deal with the issues related to security and data protection. But I wanted to bring something that is, I think it is important, that based the way we are working, not only in terms of recommendation and guidelines for the bodies, but this work depends on a technology or infrastructure, but it depends on the human as well, and the qualification, and so it is necessary all the investments. We cannot set this aside. We can't forget that it depends on this awareness and preparation of people who are dealing with this, and not only from the IT department. And so we are talking about maturity that we need to achieve, especially in the case of the government, but we need to qualify the civil servants in general so they can know the GDPR and the LGPD in Brazil and take all the daily precautions in their practice. So our work is considering this reflection as well and this enhancement of people. I'm going to make a comment from the practical perspective and very quickly here. There is a market study that says that every 40 transactions per second, one of them is an attempt of fraud. So what I want to say with this is the importance of cybersecurity in the financial markets. This example comes from the financial markets and the use of artificial intelligence inside this context. I'm talking about 40 transactions per second, and one of them is fraudulent. So the cybersecurity team use artificial intelligence massively inside any program that is going to protect these systems. The example that we have nowadays to share, that it is the most controversial one, is the deepfakes. Today, it's impossible to fight deepfakes without artificial intelligence. So we are talking about uh, digital identity protection and biometry and a single authentication of a person. So without AI, I cannot protect the identity of that person against a malicious attack. But thinking about the differences that we have between human supervision and human revision that is being debated, and there's extensive debates inside the AI project, it makes sense. I cannot make a human revision in any of these attempts of frauds in this scale per second. I can supervise the model, the performance of the model, to see how effective it is in the prevention in this context. And of course, I can make the human revisions that are necessary. If you allow me to abuse this position of a moderator to bring a practical example that is going to be debated in the marketplace session, is the point of authentication of the data owners when we request the access. So that can generate a vulnerability without the proper standards to make the person who is requesting access is the owner of the data. And we saw a big difference of measures being taken. And this is the part that the data protection can benefit from a learning about cybersecurity, and at the same time having the problems that many access is being requested for access. So facial recognition is not proportional to guarantee that this is the owner of the data that is requesting access. So that calls the attention to the principle of the minimization of the data that is necessary to access the system. So I think both walk along one another. So security and cybersecurity has to be in constant dialogue. And we have a time for a last answer here. in the margin of any technical measures or legal measures that is also important. And cybersecurity, it's a matter of culture, it's a matter of education. I can have the best system, the better designed with this technology, with the privacy and with all the security characteristics. And when you are authenticating that, you can generate a token that marks my real identity, etc. And we don't know who is behind the transaction. And it is inside the mimic measures that to access the data. So if myself as a user, if I am not aware of the risks that I am exposing myself to, and this connection that I'm using, this safe, if I have no knowledge to identify that this website is safe, that I am accessing a safe website, so this risk of a cyber attack is exposed with any transaction. This is also present. And it happens the same when we use systems or platforms that have some type of artificial intelligence model where it's not clear for what it is used or what type of analysis until I prompt. Sometimes voluntarily I provide my data without knowing what is behind. That makes not only the decision makers but any organisms give them the fact that generating this culture in the people. So one way or the other, this link between cybersecurity and data protection can be clear, but also from our side as consumers and users, we need to know how to protect ourselves against any risk. This plenary session, we are going to invite Luciana Cabal, Danilo Donedo's wife, to give the Danilo Donedo's award. As you know, since last year, we decided to dedicate our quality awards, Danilo Donedo Awards, that recognize the best contributions to our annual call for papers to honor the memory of Danilo as a pillar of data protection in Latin America. Once again, I highlight that every year there is no competition with the Danilo Donedo Award of ANPD. There's two complementary awards. And I'm really happy that we have Luciana and also Danilo's sons here. So Danilo's children are here. So I want a round of applause to them here. Hello, everyone. I am the duck with the three ducklings here from Danilo. So I really want to thank Luca and Nicola for the invitation to be here. I think that this opportunity to for the Danilo's kids to see the life that he dedicated to a dream, to a proposal, to an idea, today it is being stronger and it's gaining more complexity. Every event that we follow, we see how much every piece that was discussed at home that Danilo always shared with us, his ideas and his achievements, especially in the area of data protection, in other areas as well that he worked. So it's really important for them to see how is it worthwhile to invest in something that we believe in. Today it is an important day because it's even more emotional because it would be Danilo's birthday today, and with this idea that this can be the National Data Protection Day, but it is also a day, it is a coincidence, but Adriano, my oldest son, was also born today, so today is his 16th birthday as well. And I think it is a huge gift. His father is not here physically anymore, but somehow his ideas are here in all of you. So this is a gift, a special gift to him. So thank you very much for allowing me to give this 16th birthday gift to Danilo's son. So I'm here today to present the awards, the Danilo Donedo Awards, and And I really want to thank again Professor President Valdemar for the awards of NPD that also is named after Danilo. They are complementary, as Lucas said. The NPD is awarding thesis statements, and these are papers. So each one of these initiatives come to us as something really kind, really delicate that the Brazilian society is giving back to a citizen, to a person that worked really hard for that to happen. So today we can have a law, we can feel represented by this law, we can feel protected by these ideas. So it's really beautiful to see the results, especially in the form of an award. So the award encourages other people to think about this subject. And Danilo was really worried about education, so everything complements each other. So very quickly before giving the awards, I want to talk about the Danilo Doneda Institute. That is an institute, an initiative that we created as a way to preserve his memory, but also to disclose the digital education, to disclose what's happening, what is being discussed. So the institute has the purpose, and we are also proposing to publish the Professor Stephanus Hodotak's books that he was Danilo's professor during the time that he spent in Italy, and Danilo translated some books. We translated together. So we are on the verge of publishing this book. So if you are interested, if you want to get to know our institutes, you can talk to us. We are open for suggestions and contributions. Thank you very much. Now let's go to the awards. I need to get my cell phone here. Okay, let me take my glasses off. I can't see with them. Well, this runner-up, the second place, was a tie. There are two second places for Danilo Doneda Awards was Jacqueline Souza Abreu with the work Intermediation of the Surveillance of the States in Brazil and Data Protection in Corporation Litigations and Constriction of Private Entities, History, Fundamentals, and Regulation. The other second place, Jacqueline is not here, so we have only second place that is here, but so Jacqueline is here, so she can get later. The other second place was Guilherme Musselin and Fernando Sattler with the work Identity Self-Determination and Artificial Intelligence and the Strengthening of Data Protection in the Digital Media. And the first place goes to Beatriz Kira. She wrote the work Interagency Coordination and Digital Platform Regulation, Lessons from the WhatsApp Case in Brazil. I'm not Beatriz, of course, but I'm going to receive the award on her behalf. And she gave me some words to receive on her behalf. I'm receiving this work after my professor that is a huge legacy in the area of data legacy and the foundation of this event is a great honor. And I would add to that that she did a work about the inter-institution collaboration, showing an important characteristic, that is the dialogue in the data protection. That's something that Danilo fostered a lot. So I think it is righteous to have an award for this type of work. Thank you.
Well, that was it, everybody. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful event. Okay, so now we will start with our first sessions. We have one over here and 3 on the 8th floor. So I think you already have your credentials. You can move freely through FGV. We are 20 minutes late, so our lunch will start at 1:20 p.m. and not at 1 p.m. as we had originally scheduled. Thank you, everybody, and a round of applause for our speakers.